Welcome back to your favorite podcast, Sippin the Dry. I'm Sean, and today we're going to go over choosing the right fly line for you. Today I've got Parker with me. I'm sure you've seen his face before. Welcome back, sir.
Cheers.
Cheers.
We got some new stickers coming the way, and maybe some new shirts for Sippin the Dry, right?
I don't know if anybody can see this. We have our logo, a couple stickers. I'm hiding it. Not allowed to know yet.
Yeah, look, yeah.
We've been working on it. We got some shirts. We've got some cups, some really awesome glassware.
Yeah.
I've seen full colored images with Sippin the Dry.
Camp mugs coming. Yeah,
Yes.
I'm stoked, yeah.
That's going to be good. Holiday season's going to be great. All right. I wrote a little something here that sounds very professional, and I want to read it out loud. Choosing a fly line can be a daunting task to all those but the most experienced anglers. Right? Even then, some situations might require the finesse that only comes from years of experience in a select environment. While we can't give you the years of experience, we can, however, give you some techniques and tips for choosing the correct line, no matter where you're going or what you're targeting. Yeah, that's right. How professional is that? That was great, wasn't it?
Yeah, I think we get a lot of emails and certainly phone calls, and even people walking in the shop that ask, what's the best fly line? What fly line should I get? I'm new or I'm experienced. I just bought a new rod. What should I do? And typically the fly line, I think, is one of the most important things to kind of choose.
Between the rod and the line, I think we've decided on podcast past that those are probably the most important two that you can have. And I don't know how to match up saltwater, but I can do freshwater. So why don't we start there, and then maybe you can teach me some saltwater techniques, matching it up.
Yeah, I mean, even to keep it simpler, to start as a foundation, fly lines are measured in grains. And so when you're building a fly rod can handle a certain amount of grains that can deliver the cast and the fly correctly. And we're talking about loading the rod. And really they've went to a standardized weight system where it goes from 1 to up to 16 weight now to make it a little easier on the consumer.
True.
So when you walk in the shop or shop it online, you're going to see a weight forward 1 or weight forward 5 and that sort of thing. And typically you're going to try to match that to the rod.
Okay. 5 weight rod, 5 weight line.
Yeah, and what I'll say is fly lines. Most of the time you can actually check the grain weight of it, and then when you're buying your rod you can actually figure out what the grain weight, and there's usually a plus and minus, so there's a low and a high that a rod can take.
Okay.
So that's where a lot of times you'll see guys that maybe half step heavy or maybe go up a line, and it's because that rod can handle that load. But
True.
In simplicity, what we try to tell, beginners or intermediates that are getting in sport or they're getting new rods and stuff like that, is you really want to try to match the weight of the line to the weight of the rod. The industry is doing a great job. A lot of these fly line manufacturers are working with rod manufacturers at the same time. So, they're testing.
It's about time.
They're testing the lines with the rods. So that's kind of the first step, is understanding that there's weight, and in that weight you can actually rip off 30 feet. You can put it on a little scale, and that's going to give you the weight.
The grams.
Grains.
The grains.
Yeah, grains. It's an old bullet way to do it. When you're actually filling up black powder with bullets, you're trying to figure out grain weight to make sure that the bullet goes a certain distance, a certain height, that sort of thing.
Really?
So the fly line and arrows do it. Archery does it as well. Huh. But fly lines, they've made it a lot easier. I would say when I started as a kid, you certainly didn't have a lot of these tapers and stuff like that. And that's kind of why I think people ask the question is, looking at this wall behind us.
There's so many. And
in the warehouse, we probably stock, it's got to be over 150 different tapers of lines.
Yeah.
And that's, and then you get into, they go from a 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and on. So one of the first steps I would say is, again, when you're buying the rod, you want to match that. The second thing is you're really trying to match it to the fly that you're casting and to the species. So typically, when you buy your rod or you buy your line, you're typically looking at, am I trout fishing? What size fly? And you can ask pros, you can ask your shop, you can ask, your buddies, what flies are we tossing? What size? Are they weighted, non-weighted? And typically lines and the rod is going to be determining that factor.
Absolutely.
Okay,
yeah.
So if you're tarpon fishing, it's a different fly, it's a different sort of
You're not gonna
casting
throw a dry
style to
fly.
different applications. So there's going to be different lines or different rods for that. Same with trout. I think some of the coolest things that they've come out in the past 10 or 15 years are the zero weight rods and the 1 weight rods where they're super thin. They're dry fly only, small creek. I mean, that's pretty cool. And these lines are just barely anything when they're doing this.
It's like tippet, and they're beautiful presentations.
Yeah.
Yeah. When I'm targeting, we talked a little bit like targeting species. We have trout. Now, is that only trout? Is that the only thing I can use that for?
That's a good question. It goes back to, I think the importance is what the rod can hold as a load.
True.
And grain. And then the second thing is the fly that you're using. So, typically around here, our trout guys are going to be smallmouth guys. They could be some carp guys. It could be panfish guys. Again, certain flies are going to match that rod. And so, when we sell rods and lines, we're going to do a 5 or 6 weight with a trout or something, and smallmouth 6 or 7. But you can use these rods and lines for a little buffer, a little versatility.
Yeah, versatility. That's
but there's going to be
word.
there's going to be a time where you're not, the taper's not going to be able to toss out the fly as well. It's going to be,
like
it's not going to load the rod. It's going to basically make your rod a noodle. It's going to overload the rod. And
that was bad. You'll feel that right away when you're casting if you have too heavy of a file
absolutely,
there.
Yeah.
And you'll just know right away.
And typically what we find on the customer service side is, guys sometimes without asking, staff or just asking the questions, sometimes they overload rods or they underload rods. A lot of stuff's on forums, and typically what we find is, when somebody says, this fly rod sucks, it's basically, well, maybe the line wasn't correct and your application that you're using it for isn't correct for that rod.
Absolutely.
So, fly line is,
it can make a huge difference.
The first thing I do is I think about, when I'm fishing, and I'm going to get a new outfit, what am I fishing for? And then I'm going to match the line kind of, am I going to dry fly fish? Am I going to swing soft tackles? Am I going to strip streamers? What am I going to do? I'll pick the line, and then I kind of pick the rod at the same time, and then comes the reel.
And then go from there. So, and I usually have spare spools with different types of line that I know work well with the rod that I can just switch out on the river, on the lake, wherever I'm going, and that usually helps out. So,
growing up, sinking lines started to get more prevalent, especially in the 90s, and you can get. You can get in different water columns. It's pretty cool. So when they're building these lines, they'll actually mix powdered tungsten. It's kind of expensive, but they can mix it in, and then they can still develop tapers off it. But it's how much tungsten they can add to line equals the depth, how fast and depth you can get down. So a lot of these lines you can go 1 inch per second, then get that fine, or you can get to 7 or 8 inches per second. It's really cool.
That's what I was going to bring up. We have some. Way forward, just throwing a way forward lines, and then with a sync 3.
Yep.
Now, what is that? With that S3, S7, S5, what does that even mean?
They're trying to make it easy for the consumer. They're saying sync 3, so 3 to 4 inches per second. Sync 7, 7 to 8 inches per second. So it's within an inch or 2 inches per second when they're saying that. Yeah.
True.
And that's judging inches per second, actually, bringing down the line in the water.
That's your line. That's not the fly.
That's
or
not
the
the fly.
leader
That's
or
actually your line going down.
The line sinking.
Correct.
While your fly slowly folds behind that. Theoretically.
Theoretically, yeah. And back to the spool stuff. We recommend, if you're gonna fish a variety of different flies on a single rod, a good floating line always is first. Because you can really target a lot of the upper column and the surface, but having a sinking line and sometimes a full sink. Growing up, I would always have a float and a sink, and you get the spare spool to match.
Yep, and that is so good because you never know what you're going to come up against.
Yep.
Does temperature of the water and the line type, does that make a difference at all?
It absolutely makes a difference, and the fly line manufacturers do an exceptional job of doing this. And basically, the idea is, in simplistic, you have freshwater and saltwater, and typically the major difference between that is the heat. Okay, and so sometimes fly lines will get overheated and they become very wilty, right?
Okay.
Typically, in a freshwater sense, you're in a temperate zone or you're in a cold water zone, so they may use regular nylon cores or supple, basically a supple core, which is a little bit more stretchy, a little bit more finer.
Has a little give to it.
But saltwater, you need something that can survive the heat, can remain stiff, and actually, be able to still remain stiff to throw over the fly. And so, with these plasticides, they can make it stiffer. The cores can make stuff stiffer. So yeah, when you're actually saltwater fishing, there are saltwater specific fly lines that you need to purchase.
Absolutely. Airflow, I know, does a phenomenal job with their saltwater.
Everybody does. I mean, everybody's a little different on how they make lines,
Yep.
but each one is going to have that saltwater specific, and the reason for that is that in the broad sense is it's heat. It's too much heat hitting the fly line. It's 90, 100 degrees.
Hot.
You need a stiff core to be able to deliver the fly.
The saltwater, does that break down those fly lines like a freshwater? It would break that down faster than it would the coating on the saltwater,
That's
right?
a good question. Certainly some lines, they're putting additives or plasticizers in. Some lines are already fully coated in how they do it between like Scientific Angler and Rio and Airflow. But at the end of the day, saltwater is supposed to rinse off everything.
Clean it completely.
You want to clean your line, so guys that go out and saltwater fish, you're going to have to clean your line a little bit more because the corrosive nature of salt.
Yep.
But actually, I clean my line freshwater fishing usually after every time I fish or every other time.
Okay.
And that just keeps the line clean. And really, it's just, tap water running it through.
Yeah, that's what I do.
And, most of these manufacturers, they make line cleaners. Those are great. Basically, those kind of get the slickness back. And, yeah.
To just take all the crap off that's not supposed to be there.
Yeah, I think, a lot of guys, when they're coming into the shop or calling us, they're like, I have an old fly line. They haven't used it. Sometimes lines
Years.
that are coiled up on a reel for, a year or two. It's hard to get that stretch and be able to get that straightened
Right.
out. Guys also see cracks in their lines, and certainly that's kind of not, it's because it's either old, it's maybe had a lot of sunlight or UV, maybe it's just because they've never cleaned it either.
It could be just defective as well.
No, I mean most fly lines. I've rarely, out of all the years of GM in the shop, there's rarely times that I see a defective.
That you
line.
see a defective.
Yeah,
That's
sometimes
cool.
the
That's
coating
good,
doesn't
though.
stick, and you have those, but that's a rare option.
Yeah, that's cool. Does the color of the line really matter with the leader and
I think
tippet and all that?
Yeah, I think that's to people's preference.
Think so. Okay.
But from my standpoint is that your leader is the extension between the fly and the fly line, right? So
Yes.
you can use longer leaders to get to more finicky trout per se, or you can use fluorocarbon underwater. Certainly guys with eyesight issues like oranges and brighter colors,
Yes.
and that helps them
More
cast.
of an indicator line.
Yeah, especially in saltwater, sometimes it's hard to gauge a 20, 30, 40-foot cast when the guide's yelling at you, so sometimes the lines that are easy to see help.
Yeah.
Guys that typically fish freshwater, clear conditions, they like kind of subtle earthy tones.
That's
Olives and tans. A
more
lot
of
of
a camo looking.
a lot of lines now are olive, tan, very kind of earthy.
Yeah.
Your saltwater lines are going to be a little bit more bright in your face for that reason, but
Reds, oranges.
I think some people that really fish a lot could say, yeah, the color of a line spooks a fish for sure.
That's what I've heard, and that was my question: is that true?
I haven't experienced it too much. I think
I can't say that either.
leader and the fly is more critical at that point.
Absolutely.
But that's
Yeah.
mine.
We have obviously in-shop favorites. Do you have a favorite fly line that you go to that you think is better? I like Rio and Orbis.
Well, we carry, Airflow, Scientific Angler, Orvis, and Rio.
Mm-hmm.
And, I really don't have a favorite. I try to test out as much as I can
Sure.
as a GM. Some lines in some situations are better. I've really enjoyed Scientific Angler's Sonar series for underneath. They've
Okay.
they kind of came out with a triple density where it kind of has different densities of sinking throughout the taper
Throughout
of the
the
line.
line?
Yeah, so
Okay.
maybe the first 15 feet sinks at 3 inches per second, the next is 5 inches per second as you're building up to that 30, 40 foot depth. Rio typically has some good slick casts. They came out with slick
That's-
casts, and I
that's
really
new.
like
Yep.
those. They're elite stuff. But no, I really don't have a favorite. I try to have a couple different ones between my 4 and 6 weights. Saltwater, each one makes a good one. I think Rio makes a good saltwater line. But yeah, you're not really making a bad decision on who you go for. I think the major difference that you're gonna find is some lines make sound, some lines don't make sound.
Textures.
Airflow and Rio, even Airflow has a ridge technology, which is pretty cool. It kind of lessens the surface friction going through the guides. It's
Yep.
really cool. But those Rio and I should even say Orvis Hydros and Airflow, but these are going to be smooth, non-sounding lines. You know, when you're fly fishing, you're not going to hear a swooshing sound. And some guys call us and they're like, hey, you know, I can't listen to this textured sound. And some lines have this texturing that when it goes through the guides, it makes a sound.
Yeah, and absolutely. Yeah, I couldn't have said it any better. Phenomenal. That's great. When you're matching the line to the leader, how should I do that? Like if I have a 5-weight line, what size leader am I going to need?
I think maybe we do like a leader special, like, you know, podcast or something, because leaders there's so many different, and we could call them, you know, taper diagrams of how to build these leaders. But
that's true.
The industry does make it easy where, you know, you can, you know, when you're again finding your application, finding the species that you're targeting, they're going to make leaders that say trout on them.
Yes.
And these things are tapered to an industry kind of standard of what a typical trout leader step down process for a 9-foot or for a 12-foot leader is.
Like a tapering.
Exactly. There are some guys that still do the old system where they build their own leaders from, you know,
from tippet.
Yeah, from tippet.
I've heard of that.
And that's a good way. I mean, especially if you're fishing a lot. You know, not every single application is the same throughout. You know, everybody's you know, local stream or ocean or something like that.
Everybody's got their own way.
Yeah, you have to taper. You have to taper it to deliver and it's really delivering the correct fly at the leader length that doesn't spook the fish.
Absolutely, good presentation. So, is there any small rule of thumb? Can I put like a 2x on a 5-weight line? What is there like a ballpark that I should stay in when choosing?
Again, we should probably do a leader thing, but yeah, I mean, you're trying to match your leader to the flights of the fish. Okay, so if your fish is pretty big, you may have to have a little stout leader.
True.
You know, because you're using maybe a larger fly or something like that. But yeah, maybe I come back and do a podcast with that about leaders.
That'd be nice. Specific rods need specific lines. We talked about that. When it comes to like glass or one piece, I know glass they have like a creek line, but like one piece, is there anything that you could use a one-piece rod for and a line that would give you an advantage over a 4-piece, 2-piece?
Well, I'll even slide in bamboo a little bit too. Is, you know,
very old school.
So bamboo, typically guys like double taper lines because bamboo can really hold a lot of power.
Okay.
A lot of people don't until they've casted one, but double taper lines work great, or a little bit longer belly lines work great for bamboo. Stepping down, glass is kind of similar, so guys will really like a double tapered in a glass, or they're kind of like a little bit not heavy load, but they'll like a load that maybe is on the high end of the grain range for that glass rod for quick loading casts.
You can feel it.
For modern rods, you know, really it's kind of a casting style. You know, again, these rods have a range, a low and a high that they can cover in this grain weight, and so, you know, sometimes you can find lines. Let's say you take a 5-weight high end rod. Some guys could cast a 5-weight line really well, maybe because you're reaching out there 50, 60 feet and it just dials in perfect. Yep. But then there's guys that are only fishing that rod at 20 or 30 feet, and so you may have to maybe up it on the grainage a little bit to load that rod quicker. It's all about maximizing load of the rod to get to the fish as quick as possible with your cast.
With the least amount of effort, really.
Right. Yeah.
Because
you
don't need to put your whole arm into it.
When buying a rod, you know, certainly look in, you know, species that you're after, and fly that you're using, and really the water way that you're using. Yeah. Are you and even saltwater, are you throwing 80-foot casts? You don't want a quick shooting line for 80-foot casts, you know, at cruising tarpon. You know, if you're bone fishing tarpon or permit or near the boat, which kind of happens a lot of times, you want a quick kind of shooting line just to turn over one shot, you know, to these fish. Same thing with trout. Typically what we find is in the western side, these guys are casting 50, 60 foot out to reach a dry. On the east coast, you know, we're casting 20 or 30 because our streams are a little bit smaller.
Yeah. They're more narrow.
Yeah.
When it comes to like high-end lines versus like a middle normal of the road, is it more successful to get that high-end line, like find the most expensive elite to go on my Clearwater, to go on my Winston, or does that matter? Is it preference, personal preference?
I mean, you know, if you talk to guys that build lines, they could go into great depth, right?
Absolutely.
But from a GM sales standpoint, you're getting the best, the most high technology that you can get out of the line for those higher elite lines. So You're getting slicker coatings.
Yep.
They're gonna be more durable. So the actual coating itself on the core is gonna be more durable. You're gonna get probably a higher flotation. You know, they've really kind of dialed in the micro balloons in the coats. So yeah, you're gonna get a better line. And typically, what that equals to a caster is it casts quicker, comes out of the guides faster, and delivers better.
Straight.
Okay. Now, in a lot of scenarios, you know, your entry, which I would say your $30 to $50 line, they're going to be basic. They're going to make a correct taper for the rod, but they may not have that slickness code. And they may not have the texture that makes it fast or slick. You know, so yeah, I mean, when you're buying a line, how I would suggest with locals or even just being online is, if you fish a lot, you're probably going to want to hire in
a good
line.
It'll last you longer.
It'll last you longer, and you're gonna fish it. You're gonna realize that this is just a better feeling. The experience is much better. Now, if you're only going out there once or twice a year, or maybe once a month, certainly that $50, $60 line is perfect. I mean,
absolutely,
it's gonna last you a couple of years and be just fine.
Yep. Awesome. Holy crap. Very informative. Do you have anything that you would like to add to teach me? I'm all ears, man.
No, I mean, I think when choosing a line, first thing is just call somebody.
Yep.
If you don't know, chat with somebody. The pro staff here, always helpful.
Very
you can
true.
read a couple things online. I would say be careful on the forums, just because everybody's different.
Everybody's an expert.
But really, the industry is really cool. They're getting so specific that now each line box is for trout. It's for Dorado. It's for GT. It's for tarpon. So they're making it easier for the consumer to say, all right, I'm going GT fishing. I need this rod,
I have
this
a
line.
6-weight rod,
and
I need this line.
And they can choose. But I think where the pro staff can come in is, we've experienced this, or we've talked to customers that write back to us.
Yep.
Got guys rolled around that are like, Parker, this was an outfit, buddy. You crushed it.
Yep.
So we're getting feedback.
The tarpon line was good, but
Absolutely.
this one was better.
Yeah, and as the manufacturers come in and see us too, they're giving us reasons why these things are right. So
Yeah, you
yeah,
got updates, yeah.
call your staff and yeah.
Use our the outfit builder on our website. It tapers down and tailors to the size of rod and
It
reel,
does.
and a lot of the other ones out there, I played around with some. They don't all do that. So I think that's one thing that we do a little bit better than everybody else, is work our outfit builder. All right. Well, I absolutely don't have anything else for you, sir. I'm
just glad to be back on Sippin the Dry.
I love it. I'm glad to be back. I took a little time off.
Yeah, it's cool.
It was nice. And yeah, glad to be back.
Cool.
All right. Well,
Thank you.
thank you.